I'm full-time.
With,
Half with it, 20 hours with Washington County and 20 hours with
I'll
City of
pay higher
Fayetteville.
taxes to get you full-time in Fayetteville, to get a full-time in Washington County.
Well, and you know, one thing, and I think about this a lot, how many schools do we have in Fayetteville? 14? How many hours does each child spend learning to write and speak the English language in those schools? Or, I don't know, to do math. Sorry, you're kind of right. But they spend a lot of time, right? Every day they go in there and they learn how to write their name, they learn how to add, they learn how to subtract. Who's standing here? Where's the institutionalized program in there telling them what we're taking from our planet?
We need to get this in the Common Core.
My point is, this needs to be part of what we're doing. We need to have dozens of people out there doing it because, and I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute, it may be the most important thing we can teach our children. And I say that from 2 decades of learning about this stuff. And I also think it's important to talk about, it's not, some people will walk away with the message, source reduction. What do you mean? That means we can't buy stuff, right? We can't do that. But it's a transition, it's a shift. There are places where this loop, where we're starting to close this loop, right? If you own a store and someone comes into your store and they want to buy butter, right? They want the butter, not the packaging. The butter is the thing you're going to consume and get that. They don't want the packaging. So if we can find a way, and there are ways to do this, of cutting out some of the stuff we don't really necessarily need and have businesses and consumers become aware of that, then we can move towards this. And this is kind of what this picture is about. Can anybody think of another example of just simple examples of like how we might get there? And things that we're already doing too.
Well, obviously, containers are.
There you go. Yeah.
If you instead of went on a picnic and took your own silverware and a cloth napkin, you wouldn't have to use plasticware and then have the trash.
Right, and this is
Or
what,
bring, the other one was bring a container to the restaurant.
the barrier that we face to getting to where we want to be with that behavior is the transition. It's,
Habit.
what year did seat belts become mandatory in the United States? Anybody know?
Seatbelts.
90s, early 90s? What happened when they told you you had to wear a seat belt? People are, I'm not putting that thing on, this is ridiculous. No, I've gone through the windshield of 1985 GMC Jimmy without a seat belt, and I can tell you that it was a good haul. My point is, when we shift something, when we talk about, plastics, we talk about reducing packaging, when we talk about changing the way we buy stuff, or don't buy stuff, or, shift regulations, that transition period is difficult because we don't like change. It's difficult. But 2 weeks after that, nobody notices it. And they just go on about their lives. And that's one thing that I noticed about it. My point is that we can get there. The transition period is just tough sometimes.
So I took a refillable coffee cup into a fast food restaurant, okay? And said, can you fill my coffee cup? She wouldn't do it because she said she couldn't because of
Health code. I've run into that too. You know what I do?
So she filled up a plastic cup to put into my recyclable cup, in my coffee cup.
And
I've seen that before, like, some of the microbreweries sell growlers, and you bring it in and they'll refill your growler, like one where my hometown in Missouri. Now what they do is you bring in your growler, and they'll give you a new growler, and they'll take that and they have to wash it. They won't let you refill your own growler because they don't know. They can't trust it.
what if 10 people walk
But
in
it's
there and
still-
say,
Right.
What if
And-
15 do?
And it's the transition,
But it's against the rules, or there's a violation of the regulations of the health department. They can't.
right?
there's a lot of gray area in there.
You just-
I was gonna
There's
say,
a
I'll
lot
take
of
it
gray
first
area in
take
there. You're right, Sherry, but I tried this at many establishments. You know what I do? I walked into the subway on MLK, Farmington, Little Rock, other places, and I just walk in there and I order a tuna sandwich or whatever, and they say, "You want anything to drink?" And I said, "Yeah, I need a cup of coffee." I just tell them, "This is what I'm going to do," and it's okay. And all of a sudden, it's,
If you're serving yourself the drink.
Oh,
They've got the
yeah,
drink
yeah.
thing over here, that's a totally
Yeah.
different
No, there's
They
better
can
situation.
take it behind the counter.
I've gotten into arguments about that, but baby steps. It's frustrating, it's very frustrating, and it's like, I have a specific reason why I'm doing this, but it's not always that simple. Well, I don't want to go much over 7, guys, we've only got a couple minutes, so I know Stephanie has to take off, but I really thank y'all for coming out. We're going to talk more about the recycling process and about plastics, but this is really, this is really the take-home message for today. Recycling is great. It's a piece of a bigger picture. And, you know, that resistance that we're changing now, you're seeing some resistance to those sorts of things, but it's short-lived because change is inevitable.
You talked about just wanting the butter. You don't want the
Yeah.
wrapper. Well, when I was a kid, that's how we got milk.
Well, and that's
You got a
what
glass jar,
I here.
and there, and they talked about energy savings, because if you put that milk in a plastic bottle, it was a lot lighter, and over the road, it burned less gas. That was one of the driving forces for that. Never mind the handle, down the jar.
And we're seeing that now with steel cans. Because you go into stores, you're gonna start finding more and more pouches, flexible, material that they build for food. That is replacing the steel can. So they're gonna be taking a container that's easily recyclable and replacing it with something that's not recyclable at all. And, but we're gonna see that this next decade, we're gonna see little changes like that.
And, you know, it's not a separate. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, we are seeing an increase in recycling, mainly because the city's growing and we have more programs in place. When I started with the city in 2002, it was curbside recycling and a drop-off. Now we have, in essence, 3 drop-offs, 2 run by the city, 1 is run by a private company that owns our national foods. And then we have apartment recycling, we have public space recycling. We have, let's see what else we have. We have a lot more options to gather stuff, a lot more on the business side of it. We were doing curbside residentially, now we have more businesses recycling with us. We've expanded that to allow them to participate. So we're getting more material. Unfortunately, our goal that our city council has asked us to get to is 80% in 10 years. We're right now at 20%.
And hasn't that been kind of a plateau, that 20%? I mean,
It-
we had that sudden growth, if I remember the chart, and then it just, I mean, we had a little more growth, but it's a plateau.
It's been hard to get past that because our curbside program for residential, it was designed for residential collection. It wasn't designed for commercial businesses and apartments. And so going out and trying to fit that program into those collection areas is pretty difficult to do.
How long have you had the apartment?
We've been doing
recycling?
apartments for about 3 years.
Because I knew it had
We
been.
have about 6 complexes recycling with us.
It's not mandatory. You need to elect the right official. Because I'm the chairman of the Water Sewer Solid Waste Committee. There's 2 of us on there that are pretty progressive. Maybe the other ones are not so much. I hear this from one of the members, and this is his point of view, it's valid for his beliefs, his attitudes, his values. And I never want to put someone down for their own beliefs, attitudes, and values just because I'm different. But we're in here because we care, and if you will elect the right people, that's who will be making these decisions, and they're not always inexpensive decisions. But I've heard this from other elected officials. All I care about is I want to put my trash out and I want it gone.
That's fine, but we're gonna pay for that
And,
in one form or another.
and then they'll say it's cheaper to get rid of the trash in Rogers and Springville than it is Fayetteville. But they don't look at the big picture. And it's hard even to do any education in someone that has that mindset. The best thing to do is to look at someone that's open-minded and get them elected.
Mark, you know, one thing, I hit that wall like 100 times.
Right.
And one thing I found is that, does anybody hunt ducks? I did when I was a kid. Anybody know what Ducks Unlimited is?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a bunch of guys that shoot ducks out in the woods, and I've hunted with a lot of those people, and you know, they're rednecks, or people that do that, but they're connected to a conservation through something that's important to them. So I've seen a lot of times when you hit that wall, if you can find something, you've got to meet people where they are. If you can find something that's important to them, you can make a road through that issue. Because I've hit that wall so many times, it's frustrating, you know, when you want good information out there and you want people to care about these things and they're just not receptive to it sometimes.
You know, I make an effort because I live in the county. I don't live inside any city limits.
Yeah.
And I make an effort to make sure that and I have for many, many years, that I take my recycling into the nearest collection center. And I educate myself about what they will take and what they won't, because West Fork wants all the lids off. They don't want you to leave lids on your bottles. They want you to take them off and throw those away because it makes their sorting easier because it's all done on a volunteer basis. And they collect a lot of recycling. I think 2 years ago it was 64 tons, and they're open 3 hours a week on a Saturday, and that's it.
I can tell you from personal stories and experience that we're very grateful for people that do that and care about it and ask questions, because that's what we need.
And then you have people who live in town, because I've had this discussion before. Well, I'm just not gonna do that, it just takes too much time, I just don't wanna recycle. And I said, you know, we've got an empty lot back there, right there behind the house, you know, what the landfill there? Because it's gonna be in somebody's backyard.
Well, the cost is going to go up when
Yes.
the current permitted sale at EcoVista fills up, which is, there's some debatability when that's going to happen, but that cost will be passed on to the consumer.
And then in Northwest Arkansas, this area that we live in, this karst geology that we live in,
Yeah.
there's not going to be another landfill in
No.
Northwest Arkansas, which means we'll be sending our trash away from here, which is going to drive that cost up.
And nobody in another state is going to want our trash, and you're gonna run into where
There's all sorts of questions.
you can see that.
You know, that's one kind of new we get into this where psychologists of recycling, like all of us in this room here, because we care, and we're the kind of people that'll go to their outbox and stuff. But I get frustrated and I don't understand how people think. Like I've been to, I've helped volunteer do recycling at bike races, or not bike events. You know, you think all these people are, you know, outdoors being healthy and all this stuff. So we'll set up trash and recycling bins, and I'm overgeneralizing, but like if the recycling comes over there and the trash bin's here, then everything goes right here. Nobody's gonna walk that extra 10 steps.
That's right.
And I don't get it.
It's all barriers to action. Brian and I did a study with this guy that's done this research. Think about, with each barrier that you put up, you lose people. Some people you lose them at 10 feet. Some people you lose them at 100 feet. Some people don't have the information, that's the barrier. Because I used to get more frustrated and be like, well, what's the deal? You're just lazy, or you don't care. But what happens is you start removing those barriers, and that's a tiny one, granted, you know. You start removing those barriers and you get more participation.
Well, people will do it with barriers too. We've managed to toilet train 400 million people in the United States, and we're talking about planetary hygiene here.
Yeah.
And so I really think with education that's consistent and continuous, I mean, how many people toilet train their children with one experience?
True.
You know, it took more than just one day, one experience. And if we're talking planetary hygiene, we've got to get really serious about education. It needs to be the keystone of our programs.
Yeah.
And I'd add to that, that true social change
Yes.
comes through generations. So if you start as young as possible, it'll be education. They will bring their parents into it, I guarantee you, they'll drive them nuts.
You're right.
So they do it the right
We've seen
way.
that.
So we have to start with the young children.
Well, I think, I agree with that sort of, except that I was in a community that had twice a week garbage collection, and we had volunteers in the schools, and the adults teaching it began to peer teach other adults. But you're right, the children were taking it on, but they thought I was
I'm
trying
not
to
saying
take
that by
the kids.
itself, I just
That's
mean
right.
that is, if you want real social change.
Right.
It starts with the children.
We do, we do a lot of different branches, but younger kids tend to be more the focus.
Yeah.
Fifth grade, fourth grade, kindergarten. And you're right, Sherry, it's much easier, because you show kids, okay, kids, you know, this is where this resource comes from. This is what happens when you recycle. And they're like, yeah, we'll do that, sure, we'll do that. And then you talk to an adult, and they're like, well, how much is that gonna cost me? Or, you know, what about this, what about this? And so, the barriers are there.
But with children, all they have to, they just have to understand that it's logical and for good quality of life. And you got them, life.
Yeah.
I've got a concept of it. The first time that we had a birthday that I can remember, I was in the 6th grade, and it was 1969. Yet my generation somehow has not, they didn't hang on to the concept to teach their children well. I remember it well, it was in our weekly reader, we did the poster sessions. It was every year there for a while, and I thought, we're making a change. So, I don't know.
Maybe I'd say,
We got really wealthy.
just,
That's part of the.
not really convenient.
Y'all, just one thing, and I know we're kind of the choir here, but something that I think about a lot is, how many times do we pay for the waste we throw away? We pay when we buy the product with the packaging. We pay our city for the recycling program or to haul it away. It goes to the landfill, and there are fees for the landfill. And then, when the landfill closes down and years later they find all the pollution, it's the taxpayers that end up paying to clean up the contamination. So we pay and we pay and we pay and we pay. And that should be part of the training too. How many times do we want to pay for the convenience of the packaging that ends up becoming waste? And, you know, and there are a lot of things that go with this scenario. How many times do we want to pay for something that really ultimately should be the responsibility of the producer, the manufacturer? The manufacturer should bear some of that responsibility for the products and the packaging they make that they pass on to the taxpayers to throw away. So that's part of the economics of it too. And if people are aware how many times they pay, they'll get pretty heated about it and they'll start making noise about it. They'll change their habits, and they'll also go after the people that make the policies that cause them to have to pay and pay and pay and pay. So that's
I don't
just
think
one
people
thing.
understand that. I don't think they've ever looked at that
No,
logically, because if they had, they might not be wanting to
Thank y'all.
pay and pay and pay.
We'll be back Wednesday, and we'll have a post-test then, and, t-shirts.
Do I have a card? Because I, like, think people are finding out who these people are that I should be electing. I don't know a lot about.
Well, I'm running for,
Oh, I've already been planning on. Yeah, I've,
and I
I'm
probably need
is running further and, the communities and everything, and so I see you post on Facebook, and I'm pretty sure you've, dominated them.
Okay, so what was the lady's name?
I don't have any good for names anymore around that. But, write it on.
She said.
B-A-R-R-A-C-A-S, just like Army
This
barracks.
Sunday. And so my car was That's what he told me. He's the one that's well, then probably what will that is finding someone to the class because of my position.
See, we can't start.
I'm gonna ask him, because I just. That's an eight, any way that
Absolutely no reason for it.
So, and I wanna do it, I just don't know how, I gotta find somebody to do myself.
And see, I come from
Yeah, I didn't think about this.
And then there would be, these, and I might be writing another two, and I can get it done the next day or so. We were wondering if you could get it printed for us. If I bring you this and say, you know, I have tons of, I need to get, you've done so much for them, I don't want to print our own anymore.